room. I opened the door.
It's been a month. Well, since then, I moved to Shadyside. This is my friend Tessa, her name is.
She wasn't home yet. I began racking my brain about what I saw. There was no one else awake besides me, and I know I saw a hand at my door. I walked around checking all the kids. All this was in a whisper tone. Open your eyes. Out of nowhere, I was snapped awake and let out a small scream as I thought the woman was still in the room. But she wasn't. There was no one by my bed. The bathroom door opened and my brother peeked into my room, confused.
Tanya.
I didn't have to say a word, and he just switched on the light for me and went back to his room. But I stayed up for a few hours after that, being too scared to go back to sleep. Terrified I would see that same woman and hear that same voice. Open your eyes.
You might come home.
Oh no, baby.
Good and what you are.
Randall Smith was raised an only child in the small town of Pearisburg, Virginia. The townsfolk remembered his mother as a nice lady who kept to herself, earning a living in a laundry room at the Giles Memorial.
Let me show you around, guys. I'll be back. Oh, good. Her parents kick her out. She's with me. This is her room here. Then this is the yoga area. Then we have the bathroom, a spare bedroom. This is spare bedroom. Then down here we have the kitchen, lounge room. Then over here, you have the bathroom. My bedroom. Gang gang. Then the outside area. So yeah. Let's go upstairs now. Let's go on the balcony now. Okay, press play.
Hospital. But for some reason, for the first few years of his life, Randall's mother chose to dress him in girls' clothing. We can only speculate as to the effect this had on the young man, but what we do know is that his school classmates would later describe him as something of a loner, as well as a habitual liar. He often told tall tales of money he didn't have, or of spurious-sounding adventures he had been on. This led to his peers calling him LR, an acronym standing for Lying Randall. During his youth, Randall would often go walking the Appalachian Trail alone, finding solace in the rolling hills and deep primordial forests. After high school, Randall earned a living doing odd jobs around Virginia. Some might have fretted at the instability, but Randall relished it, as it gave him the freedom to ramble where he liked. And just like in his youth, he would spend the majority of his spare time wandering the Appalachian Trail, sometimes disappearing for days at a time. The trail stretches for just over 2,000 miles from Georgia to Maine, and attracts thousands of hikers every single year, most of which see the trail as a kind of rite of passage for serious hill walkers. Most use the trail as a means of escaping their busy, workaday lives, taking comfort in the peace and serenity of nature. But at times, the trails are anything but serene.
I'm talking out of character for a second. GTA 5 right now is broken for me. My GTA 5 is broken. When I get a new one, whenever I do, next week or the next week after that will be the full-on GTA 5 week. But this week is full-on story, nah. I can tell you what, I promise you, when I get my new GTA 5, I'll do a GTA 5 marathon that week. But if full-on story right now, nah. Okay, 3, 2, 1 action.
And there have been a number of hideously violent crimes committed in the area.
Oh no, baby.
Perhaps the most infamous being the 2008 abduction and murder of Meredith Emerson by a psychopathic drifter named Michael Hilton, which took place in a region known as Blood Mountain. During the spring of 1981, two 27-year-old social workers from Maine by the names of Susan Ramsey and Robert Mountford decided to hike through Appalachia to raise money for a mental illness charity. On their travels, they had made friends with another hiker on the trail, but had to part ways shortly afterward. However, they had agreed to meet up near Parisburg, Randall Smith's hometown, to catch up and grab a bite to eat together. But when Susan and Robert failed to show up to the meeting, their hiker friend became concerned and contacted the police to report them missing. Deputy Sheriff Tom Lawson gathered up a handful of other deputies and then went up onto the trail to begin the search. On the way, they spoke to a number of other hikers, asking each if they had seen anyone fitting the missing couple's descriptions. Most said no, but one group said yes, reporting that they had seen a man and a woman talking with a rather strange-looking individual who seemed to be acting in a bizarre manner near the Wapiti shelter, a small log structure that had been constructed so that weary hikers could rest a while before continuing down the trail. The deputies headed straight for the shelter, finally reaching it on May 30th of 1981. By that time, it had been 11 days since the last sightings of the missing hikers, and unless they were experienced in bushcraft, the chance of them reappearing unharmed were rapidly dwindling. While searching the small wooden structure, one of the deputies noticed what appeared to be a blood stain on one of the floorboards. The men then fanned out, searching the area intensively until they came across a small clearing that contained a pile of leaves, one that looked like an attempt to cover something up. They kicked away the leaves, revealing a cloth sleeping bag that had a large, heavy mass inside of it. When they cut it open, they discovered it was the corpse of Susan Ramsey, the female half of the charity hiking couple. A day later, with the help of a sniffer dog, the body of Robert Mountford was found buried near a tree stump, also wrapped in his sleeping bag. Robert had a single bullet wound to his head, fired from a .22 caliber weapon, while Susan had been stabbed several times before being bludgeoned to death. Their bodies then dragged from the Wapiti shelter to the spots they were buried. Nearby, deputies found Susan's camera. They had hoped that the film might contain clues to who had murdered them, but found it had been pulled out and stolen. However, Susan's backpack was also found, a backpack which did in fact belong to none other than lying Randall Smith. The sheriff's deputies immediately traveled to Randall's home. He was not around, but the deputies had a search warrant and smashed their way into his place to make some seriously disturbing discoveries. Not only did they find bloody clothes and some items which evidently belonged to the murdered hikers, they also found a great deal of X-rated materials and, most disturbingly, some hospital instruments that had apparently been fashioned into makeshift X-rated toys. Deputies also found a handwritten note stating that he had been kidnapped and was going to be executed, but analysis showed this had been written in Randall's own handwriting and was no doubt merely an attempt to throw the police off his scent. The race was on to find him before he could hurt anyone else. Days passed. The police had no luck in locating Randall Smith. All of his usual haunts reported that he had not been seen in days, with rangers and police scouring the Virginia section of the Appalachian Trail with absolutely nothing to show for it. The effort was exhausting, and Deputy Sheriff Tom Lawson found himself needing a break. So he took his family on a brief vacation down to Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. But in some bizarre twist of fate, Deputy Lawson ended up getting a call from the department back home, saying there had been an arrest in South Carolina of a man that was strongly suspected to be involved in the hikers' murders. An arrest in Myrtle Beach, of all places. Deputy Lawson hurried to check the suspect out. When he arrived, he was told that the arrested man claimed to have amnesia and could not remember his name, or how he had ended up in Myrtle Beach, but that he was covered in insect bites in a way that was consistent with someone having hiked the Appalachian Trail out of prison a self-confessed murderer, but a free man, and returned to Pearisburg as a pariah. Randall lived with his mother until her death in the year 2000. After she passed, he became more and more of a recluse. Although just like in days gone by, he spent much of his free time up in the Appalachian trails, and on more than one occasion was spotted chatting with hikers, who were no doubt completely unaware of who they were talking to. But even if they did know Randall Smith, the murderer, by his image, they may not have recognized him by now. By that time, he was 54, no longer the portly young man who had been convicted of killing Susan Ramsey and Robert Mountford. He was skinny, pale, and walked with a slight limp, and his time in prison had hardened what had once been boyish, smirking features. Then, in March of 2008, Randall seemed to give up on life entirely. He took all the pictures down from the walls of his mother's home, packed a few belongings, then walked off into the woods. He took only a few changes of clothes, some camping and fishing gear, and Bo, his dog. For all intents and purposes, to the people of Pearisburg, Randall Smith had dropped off the face of the earth, there one day, totally vanishing the next. But to them, it was simply one less thing they had to worry about, so barely a peep was raised. A few months later, on May 6th, two fishermen named Scott Johnston and Sean Farmer were catching trout up near their favorite spot on a place called Brushy Mountain. It was a beautiful summer's day, perfect for outdoor activities and feeling a little closer to nature. All was peaceful and serene, when suddenly they spotted something coming through the trees toward them. It was a middle-aged man with a slight stoop, one who warmly waved before approaching their campsite. The man introduced himself as Ricky Williams.
Today's Friday.
Scott and Sean followed the
On
unwritten
Monday
code
is
of
my
Appalachia by
first
inviting Ricky
day
to sit and
back
share
at
a dinner
school.
of freshly caught
Another
fish.
day of school. It's
Ricky
not
happily obliged,
my first day at my
explaining
new
that he was
school. I've been
starving.
going here, like
That
I
he
said,
had been
it's
in the
been a
woods for
month.
weeks by that point and
And
hadn't eaten
yeah.
substantially in days. Scott and Sean could see this was no lie. Ricky was pale and skinny.
I met
The dog
this
that
chick
accompanied him
here
was
at the
evidently
first day of
equally
school.
hungry, with its ribs protruding from its fur.
And we
The
became
campsite
best
the three men
friends
had
with
dinner at
benefits.
was
We
only a
fucked
mile
off
and a half
camera,
from the
on
Wapiti
camera
shelter,
now.
the site
Yep,
of the
this is the
hiker
first
murders
time
way
you're
back
gonna
in
fuck on
1981.
camera. Oh, I
As
know.
they ate, Scott and Sean asked Ricky about his life. Ricky replied that he was graduated top of his class from Virginia Tech University and had gone on to write highly advanced scientific papers for NASA pertaining to complex new methods of spaceflight. He also claimed to be extremely wealthy, owning multiple homes in Florida and South Carolina, where he would spend his time with his wife, who was a runner-up in several
Yep, baby,
Miss
I
USA
am. You got
pageants.
them right, Tanya.
Scott and Sean
Study
listened
best
skeptically,
friend.
recognizing that
I
the
know
man's
I am,
appearance and
baby.
his tall tales about a high-flying career were most likely a complete fabrication. To them, it was almost as if the man who sat before them was in a habit of lying. It came easy to him, like it was second nature. As the hours passed, the sun began to dip below the horizon. Scott and Sean began to wonder why their guest hadn't started to make a move back to his own campsite, which was apparently a few miles further upriver. One of them made a comment that he had better head back before the inky black of night had truly descended. Falling and injuring yourself on such a secluded stretch of the trail could mean real trouble for even the fittest young man, but death for an old-timer. Ricky stayed for about a half an hour longer before finding his feet, thanking Scott and Sean, and beckoning his dog to follow. "Come on, Bo." For the man's name was not in fact Ricky Williams. The man's name was Randall Lee Smith. And just as he began to walk away from the campsite of his generous fishermen hosts, he pulled a .22 weapon from his pocket and pulled the trigger 4 times. The first bullet struck Sean in the temple. The second shot slammed into Scott's neck. The men tried to run, but still the shots came. The third tore into Sean's chest cavity, while the fourth hit Scott in the rear of his neck. Blood poured from wounds caused by red-hot lead having ripped through their bodies, but still the fishermen hurtled into the woods for safety. Scott had managed to find cover behind a tree as Sean reached his truck, parked in the grass just a few yards away. But as he climbed into the cab of the vehicle and slammed the door behind, he saw the face of Randall Smith through the window to his left. Randall raised his .22 weapon, pointed it at Sean's head, and once again pulled the trigger. But no shot rang out. The weapon hadn't fired. Randall Smith had run out of bullets. As their potential murderer began to reload the .22, Sean gunned the truck's engine and put the pedal to the metal, screeching towards a nearby road, with a bullet wound to his head. When he found the road, his headlights illuminated a figure standing in the middle of it. But it wasn't Randall Smith. It was his fishing buddy, Scott. He had survived his wounds, and had cut Sean off at the road in order to escape. Sean threw open the passenger door, and Scott dived in, still holding onto the open wound to his neck that leaked fresh blood onto the upholstery. But although they were in the process of escaping certain death...
Good girl, let's go. Let's go to my room, then we'll fuck. Dan? Come on, Thuddy. Bring her ass down there. Sure. Let's do this. Oh, hi. It's the next day. Let's smoke some weed for a day.
She was talking to. She said the little girl that was sat on the end of the bed. Needless to say, that family member was spooked. I myself had had a few things, like bangs, footsteps, and two incidences stick out in my mind. One morning, I was sat at the dining table eating breakfast with my mum, and we heard my sister walk out of her room and start to come down the stairs. We could see the lower stairs from where we were sat, and they had a distinct sound, as stairs do. My mum said, "Here she comes," and we watched the stairs as each step was being walked on, but no one was there. We went upstairs wondering what it was, just to find my sister asleep in bed. This next story is more unbelievable. To this day I've questioned my mum and sister as to if we actually saw this. My sister was 18. I was 17 at the time. My sister had gotten pregnant young, so we had her baby in the house now too. The baby was asleep in the cot upstairs in my sister's room, and was too young to roll/crawl/climb, like a few weeks old. We were sat at a dining table talking when we all heard and felt a massive bang. We all panicked and sprinted up the stairs and entered the room to find a washing maiden had fallen out into the cot, and my niece was fast asleep in the floor under where the maiden was resting in her cot. We were so puzzled, and none of us knew how that happened. After these events, we told people, and we were one day approached by a local historian who was writing a book and wanted to share our experiences in it. He also found out that our street was on a site of an old orphanage. Needless to say, he wrote the book, and we're in it, along with other ghost sightings in the area. Fast forward a few years, my parents had moved, and I'm living on my own, working in a job, and a new girl starts. Australia. Her family had just moved to the area. We were talking one day, and she started talking about ghosts. She tells me she has two...
It's got a better guess. Head into my room. My room is here. This is my room. for the bed. I'll see you in the morning. 7 in the morning. Today's Sunday. Gang gang. See that skull down there? That's the skull. You know what I mean. Press play.
Dogs that won't come into her bedroom as they whine and act scared. And tells me
today's
her
not
house
Sunday,
is
it's not
haunted.
the day of school, but I'm
I say,
riding to school. What am I
my
saying?
house was too. And then she tells me that her house had been written about and was in a ghost book. Turns out
Another day
she
of
had
school,
moved
but I'm
into my
fucking
old
riding to
house
school.
all the way from Australia, and her room was my old sister's room. I can't tell you how much of that is too perfect for a coincidence. All of this is true, and about 6 years ago, I lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone. My grandmother lived a few miles away from us in the middle of the woods. I used to love her house, but looking back, that house was pure horror. They had 100 acres of woods, and not a house in sight. There was an old abandoned barn they used for storage for tools, but the rest of the property was unused. I was a kid, 1st to 2nd grade, and every time I visited I would sleep in a spare bedroom, aka the kids' room. The kids' room had a glass case mounted on the wall with at least 50 dolls all aligned looking straight forward. My great-grandmother collected vintage dolls from every state, and I was always petrified of that room, but didn't have much of a choice. One night, me and my sister are sleeping in the room, sharing the same bed when I wake up. The room is completely blank, except for the dim hallway light. I remember seeing one of the doors of the case open, and one of the dolls started moving. Another time I was in the kids' room alone. I couldn't sleep because of what I saw last time, and that's when I noticed one of the dolls was out of place. Its head was facing the door, and this was odd because they were all mounted to the case and couldn't move. The doll's head began to slowly turn and look at me. I was off-center to the left, so there's no way it wasn't paranormal. I sat there sweating bullets under my blanket, too afraid to yell for my grandma, and I eventually passed out. And when I woke up, the dolls were facing forward again. They have moved out the house since, and I think the dolls are in storage, but they still own part of their land and use it for camping. I am a collector of vintage and antique items, including mid-century fashion dolls. I usually purchase them from thrift stores, estate sales, or very occasionally on Craigslist. Recently I purchased a group of 1960s Barbie dolls that were a real bargain. I know the woman had a great knowledge of vintage dolls since she used to sell them on eBay, so she knew what they were worth. Still, I didn't question why she was selling them at such a low price. I was delighted with said purchase and couldn't wait to fix them up for my collection. A few days later, my bedroom suddenly became infested with flies. It was absolutely insane how many of these dirty little beasts filled my room. They seemed bent on driving me mad, as they were constantly buzzing in my face or landing on or over me. Some folks say that flies are a bad omen that signify the coming of bad times. These flies were of plague-like proportions, and were also a true enigma of why they arrived when they did. Around the time, I became very ill with flu-like symptoms. The weirdest part of this illness was a strange feeling like my brain was burning. I also experienced severe headaches that included crazy brain fog that felt like torture. It's hard to articulate exactly what the feeling was, but I've never experienced such an odd feeling in my head. It was so intense that ending my life crossed my mind. One last oddity to add to the pile. Usually I'm a very vivid dreamer with dreams that always have the same basic elements. After the purchase, my dreams have become dark and muddled. When I wake up I feel exhausted as if I haven't slept. So why did I equate these mysterious happenings with the recent purchase of the dolls? I know it's not entirely logical, but it's just a strong feeling I have. What should I do? Could an inanimate object be cursed or bring bad luck? Maybe that's why she sold them for so cheap. I just want to add that I do not practice the occult nor believe in ghosts. The reason being is that after my father passed away quite recently, I saw no sign of him. My best friend also ended his own life some years before that, and I felt that if I were ever to experience a spiritual visit, he would have given me some sign. I just want to believe, but I can't. I'm currently 17 and live in Victoria, Australia. Let me explain my predicament. My family and I just moved into a rental house about 2 months ago and have been noticing a shadow out of the corner of our eyes. It started off in only one place where we'd see it pass by one window. This was interesting to me because several of my family members said they seen the same thing, and when we decided to finally talk to each other about it, we discovered that we'd seen similar things. At first we shrugged it off. That was until I had my own personal experience. My elder brother and I had been sitting at the dinner table. The table is right next to the kitchen bench for reference, when we saw a shadow of a head out of the corner of our eyes poke up, so it was just sticking over the bench. But of course, when we'd look over there, there'd be nothing. Now, we have 2 dogs that are in the house, and at first we thought it was one of them. That was until we realized one was in the room with my sisters, and the other head off to bed. We actually saw it a few more times. My personal experience comes after, when we finally decided to go to bed, probably around midnight. I'd gone to the bathroom after putting the other dog in my room, as one dog is with my sisters and one is with me. Now, where the sink is situated in the bathroom is at the opposite end to the door, so you'd have your back to the door when you wash your hands. I'd finished washing my hands and turned around to locate a towel or something to dry them with, when I saw a shadowy figure walk past the doorframe. Me, being in a kind of curious daze, while keeping my head straight, walked very slowly to the doorframe which leads to a small doorway, and once I'd reached the opening, I could see out of the corner of my eye. It was so close that, if I'd have slightly lifted my hands, I would have touched it. But of course, once I looked directly at it, it's gone. After the encounter, I hadn't seen it in almost 2 weeks. I'm not sure if it's bad or not. But does anyone know what this could be? Because I'm a bit freaked out. About 10 years ago or so, my family and I brought back these small vases, who we were told were 400 years old from Machu Picchu. The vases were made from mud and had a face carved on them. We were given them by a family friend who said he wanted to give us something special for visiting Peru. He claims he brought them from a local in the Pisco region of Peru where Machu Picchu is. We brought it back home to Canada, and pretty much from week 1, a horrible streak of bad luck and accidents at a very young age. My father lost both his jobs. My brother and I were both constantly sick, and my little sister would start screaming randomly. Pretty much on the verge of being homeless, we were looking for things to sell and came across these things. We didn't know if we could even sell them, and for how much. To get an idea of the value, we called one of my dad's friends in Peru, who had worked in a museum. After a bit of back and forth, he told my dad that these types of items are not meant to leave its home soil, and are not worth more than a few bucks. He said that these items are probably cursed. He said to lift the curse, we prick our fingers and smear a little bit of blood on each one and send them back. Now, of course, we were very skeptical and thought they were probably worth something. We assumed the guy wanted them so that he could sell them. I mean, a blood sacrifice? That's ridiculous. Fast forward 2 days, my mother and father get into a pretty nasty car accident. We were okay, but they both needed to be off work for a few weeks. After that, they both decided that maybe we should send them back and do the blood thing. We sent them back, and the next week after that, things got noticeably better. My father found a very good job, as did my mum. We found a really good place to live with a very low rent and overall better health. What do you guys think? Coincidence? Cursed pots. My brother used to live with our aunt for a few years. My youngest cousin, who was a little girl back then, was made to share a room with her older sister, so my brother could use her room. My little cousin's room was filled with dolls of all shapes and sizes, as in...
Let's pause it. Head to bed. Wake up in the morning for school, I guess. See you guys in the morning. 5 in the morning. Let's head to school, I guess. Woke it back up. Head to school. Jump down. It's another day of school for me. Well, not red, crossing the oval down here comes. Gang, gang. Well, not red, go here. And red cross here. Press play.
The only space in the room without one was the bed, and a few steps leading to it. As expected, this creeped out my brother all the time, and he would take his time to reposition them in a way that their backs faced him instead. But without fail, every time he woke up, all the dolls were facing him again. He said there were even 3 or 4 dolls that always ended up sitting beside his head, even if he had put them away in the cabinet or locked them out of the room. At first we tried brushing it off by saying it couldn't have been our cousins playing a prank on him, until it went on even when he was alone in the house for days. It happened to him until the day he moved out 2 years later. My aunt and cousins said they'd never experienced anything remotely weird in that room, so it was clear they had a preference for my brother. I'm nearly 30 now, and still remember this experience like it were yesterday. I was curious to know if it's happened to anyone else in their lifetime. I was around 7 years old. We had a huge 2-story house where most of the living rooms and such were upstairs. The garage and laundry were downstairs. The stairs themselves were quite tall. 2 flights of stairs went to the top, made some form of wood, and my bedroom was the first room on the right at the top of these stairs. I was sound asleep one night, when all of a sudden I was dreaming of someone being in the laundry. Immediately following that, in my sleep, I heard this extremely loud thumping sound. Someone was running up the stairs, and it was in a hurry. I awoke and I could hear it still. It was running, and then it stopped. A moment later I heard breathing outside my doorway. My door was open, as I usually like sleeping with the door open, and hallway light on. I was pretty much frozen and petrified at this point. Usually, in bad dreams as a wee kid, you would call out for your parents. I was too frozen and too scared to do anything, let alone call out. I laid down and faced the wall, not wanting to move, and I could still hear that breathing. I had a gut feeling something was just sitting outside the doorway. I woke up next morning and noticed one of my figurine toys had been moved around. That was the last thing I remembered from that experience. I then started having awful reoccurring dreams in every house we moved to. These dreams lasted probably a good 5 to 7 years, and I would wake up in my dreams with my door open. I would look down the hallway from my bed and see someone sitting at the dining table. In my dream, I would do the same thing, just lay back down and pretend to be asleep. However, in the dream, this figure would always get up, walk into my room, and put its hands over my face. I would always go through a motion where I would try to force myself to wake up, rolling my eyes around and the like, even trying to twitch my body or yell. This strange figure, which I could never see since my eyes were closed in the dream, would try to suffocate me with its hands over my whole face to prevent me from waking up. Has anyone ever experienced anything like this? Because of my general interest in horror, and because they were appealing to me for a while, I collected dolls. It didn't matter what type. I had some porcelain ones, some pretty-looking horror movie-level dolls, that sort of stuff. They were generally creepy to the majority of people, and of course, they're haunted, was a joke that I often had. But I never had an issue with any of them. In fact, I thought they were all comforting. They all had names, and I had a history of picking them out, usually from antique shops, but I had 2 or 3 from a house sale after the owner passed away. On October 28th, 2017, my parents were out of town, so my brother and I were home alone, and my dad sent me a picture of the coolest doll they found at this church thrift shop. The doll was the epitome of everything I liked. I loved clowns and circuses, and the soft pastel colours were my absolute favourite. So much so that I was writing a story at the time that reflected these interests. The doll was perfect. It felt like it was for me, like in that Coraline sort of way, but instead of looking like me, it was just something no one else could have wanted. In all honesty, I don't think my dad would buy it, but lo and behold, when my parents returned, I had a new doll to add to the collection. This was the first doll that I hadn't bought on my own or personally picked out, but I wouldn't expect it to matter. All of this happened, and I found out more things about the doll. One being that my parents bought it, and the cashier avoided touching it completely. On top of that, they said, "Oh, you're buying him." Honestly, that wasn't uncommon. I'd been given a doll for free before because it was in such bad shape. Was that my father, who is very strongly a factual person and doesn't believe in ghosts, even the slightest, said he felt this doll before he saw it. To say the least, my mum wasn't happy he went through with the purchase when she found that out. I remember vividly how excited I was to hold it for the first time. I got no negative feelings from it. This was just a doll. I do remember that one of the first things I noticed was his lack of eyes. I figured it was an old one, and the eyes had fallen out. If anything, it just made me like him more. The creepy clown doll, who I never named, quickly found his spot on my shelf, and all was well. I don't even remember when I started to get a bad feeling. It started minimally, small things like feeling uncomfortable around them, or that I didn't like them facing me when I was laying down at night. I was never uncomfortable with my dolls, and even when I didn't want to admit it, I wanted to be the weird girl who collected creepy dolls, but all of a sudden being around them made me anxious. I can only explain it as a deep vibrating in my chest that was nothing but discomfort to be in my room. I ignored it for the longest time, but being in that room alone was invoking an anxiety in me that I haven't felt before or since. At some point, I started having progressively worse nightmares, a reoccurring theme that they were never far from real life. In fact, they usually took place exactly where I was at the time, whether it be my bed, the couch. They were where those nightmares would be so convincing, you'd be unsure whether you had woken up or not. I recall 2 nightmares in particular. One where I was laying in bed. The room was dark, but not so dark. I couldn't see anything. I was laying on my side facing away from the dolls and towards my closet. The door slowly opened, and there was a really big doll just standing inside of it, bigger than people-sized. It looked at me, but only its eyes moved, and for a moment, that's all I saw before I awoke. This was my first experience with what I can only identify with sleep paralysis, but I don't know if I was actually unable to move or not, or if I was just too scared of what might happen if I did. Of course, nothing was in my closet. It sounds like a cheesy nightmare for sure, but to me this was terrifying. It made it hard to breathe, and made my stomach ring. The other nightmare was when I was taking a nap on the couch, and in the dream I woke up and went to my room. When I went inside, I looked at the dolls, and they were moved. Then I woke up again, and this repeated. Each time the dolls became more and more scattered, like anything I had felt before. I walked as slowly as I possibly could, as if that was going to help with anything. I was just scared of the possibility that they might have been moved. I knew that if I went in my room and the dolls were out of place, something was really, really screwed up. I turned on every light I could. I was visibly shaking with fear, but nothing was moved. It almost felt like I was being mocked. The nightmares continued for a while.